If it'll load. It's probably already live and I'm just making a fool of myself.
That's okay. We can keep having conversations with ourselves so we don't have the awkward pause.
Julia, it says here that his meeting is now streaming live on Facebook. I don't know if
Perfect.
It
I
does
believe we are good to go. All right, let me make sure I have all of my ducks in a row here, as in my.
I see it too.
Perfect. Awesome. And let's do this for the panelists. If you wouldn't mind, I guess we'll keep our mute on until, as we're having discussion, we can unmute our microphones just to keep down on the sound. And we'll give everybody just a moment to join. And I'm going to set my screen up so I can see everybody and my questions. All right. And we should be good. Hello, everyone on Facebook land. Thank you for tuning in and joining us this evening for a very special conversation. My name is Julia Desario, and I have the honor of serving as Miss Gastonia 2020 through the Miss America organization. In addition to that, my everyday job does not require a crown and sash, but it does require a conducting baton, as I am a chorus and piano director at Crest Middle School in Shelby, North Carolina. And this session this evening is being offered to you all on Facebook Live as the final session of my virtual arts retreat initiative that is just wrapping up. We have had 23 different classes offered for free, all taught by Miss America organization title holders from across the country who have volunteered their time to share their talents and their gifts and their passions with young people and adults from across the country. And we have had such a fantastic weekend connecting with one another through the arts. And so if you have been a part of that, thank you so much. From the bottom of my heart, it has been an excellent weekend. And I'm excited to offer this final session to you all. And so we are going live tonight for a panel discussion on diversity and inclusion in the arts education classroom. And so I'm excited to introduce you to our panel discussionists this evening. So I'm just going to go in the order that I have written down here on my notes. So first off, we have Mr. Maurice Burgess. Feel free to wave and say hello. Maurice is my old high school choir director and definitely somebody who has shaped my journey as a music educator and gave me a set of wings to fly and be successful in this career. So I'm incredibly indebted to you, Maurice. And in addition to that, he now serves as the director of vocal activities at Gregg Middle School in South Carolina, where he also serves on the South Carolina Music Educators Association Task Force on Diversity. So we're excited to hear your perspective tonight and all that you have to offer to the conversation. Next up, we have Dr. Nathan Street, who is the Director of Fine Arts for Guilford County Schools in North Carolina, where he is in charge of hundreds and hundreds of different arts educators from across the county, ranging from music, visual arts, dance, theater, you name it. He is your man. And if you didn't know, I actually didn't know this until today, that Guilford County Schools is the third largest school district in North Carolina. So you guys definitely have, you, Dr. Street and Miss Fisher and Miss Wandolin have a lot of perspective coming from a larger county where you serve lots and lots of students. So we're excited to hear from you. I have to brag on Dr. Street. When I wanted to facilitate this conversation, I was searching for people to be a part of the conversation, and one of my college professors, Dr. Morgan Soja, gave me Dr. Street's contact information and was like, he's your guy. Reach out to him and see if either he or some of his coordinating teachers from Guilford County would be interested. And so he has been instrumental in acquiring our next two guests to join us. And they are Miss Wandolin Jones-Hunt, and she is a visual arts educator at Parkview Village Elementary Expressive Art Magnet School in Guilford County. That is a mouthful, and I'm super excited to hear more about your experience teaching at a magnet school for elementary students and what experiences you have to bring to the conversation as well. And then finally, we have Miss Christine Fisher, who is a dance instructor at Eastern Guilford Middle School in Guilford County. And she is also the Shape Dance Teacher of the Year, which I think is incredible. And I feel so honored to have you as a part of this conversation. You guys are fantastic, and I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us this evening for this conversation. So let's get started. I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to start letting you share some of your thoughts and ideas. So let's start. I'll just open the floor. This will be a question that anybody can jump into. Let's just start with the basics. So for anybody who's watching, you know that the title of our session tonight is Diversity and Inclusion in Arts Education. I feel like that's those two words are things that we've heard a lot of this year. But if somebody could break that down for us and just tell us what that means for arts education and what that looks like.
I'll be glad to jump in, Julia, and just say that as far as I'm concerned, when I'm looking at diversity, let me take each of those separately, because diversity to me is not just diversity as far as racial and ethnic diversity, but it's also diversity as with gender, it's diversity with sexual orientation, diversity with background, with culture. And in Guilford County Schools particularly, we have over 90 dialects, languages and dialects. And so it is a very diverse community, everything from Montagnard to Korean, to Japanese, Chinese, Brazilian. We've got a lot of students from a lot of different areas. And so diversity to me is also art form diversity. So we do a good job, I think, of really focusing on traditional art forms. We don't do so well with incorporating modern approaches to art making and music making and such as that now. And I think that we have to be a little more open to that. And I also think about cognitive diversity, because you've also got students who have learning disabilities, who are cognitively disabled, who, you've got to have a different approach to them. And then that bridges straight over into inclusion and inclusivity. I think about the arts needs to be probably the most inclusive environment in the school. And it is the easiest place to be inclusive, regardless of what your background or what disability may be or what your culture may be. It is that you're open and you are ready to learn from and to experience the experiences of others. And so that's the way that I look at diversity and inclusion from my point of view.
I would love to piggyback on Dr. Street and just say that a lot of the times when we talk about diversity in arts education, sometimes it's talked about on the surface level, like we need to give a variety of what we teach, a variety of different styles of dance, a variety of different music, a variety of different arts. And I think it's more than that. I think we need to dig a little bit deeper and talk about diversity in what we value, diversity in what we put on the stage, diversity on what we put on display. Even in dance, there's been a push, to, diversity in different genres that we teach, but it hasn't changed what we value in choreographic perspectives, the way we view those things. And so I just think we need to dig a little bit deeper that way.
I'm going to piggyback off of both of those because they were fantastic, and I agree with every single word that was said. I think also too, and for me as a musician, when I look at programming for my students, not just that there's the diversity of repertoire, but also too that those students that are sharing their perspective, that we get to hear a diversity of perspectives or the diversity of the experiences and how those shape and inform us as a group. And it's really cool because when you do that, you'll start to see where this person's experiences and perspective influences this person's experiences and perspective, and the overall just dynamic and the overall way of expressing things, and even the sound of the music, the sound that your group makes begins to change based on how we can change each other. And I also too, I fully agree on the inclusion side of it, that the cognitive side of it is a thing that people don't really talk about as much. One of the the things that I love is that I have kids that are self-contained students that come to my class. You know, they might be self-contained for all of their core classes, but they get to come and they get to experience with students that, again, have different, I guess what I want to say, cognitive gifts and hurdles to deal with. And it's just a beautiful thing. And I think that inclusion also has to include the accessibility of that art form for anyone, regardless of, you know, I think we always think about race, but socioeconomic status. That also too, I think it has to be a thing that's presented in a way when we're dealing with middle school, for instance, there's a political background that's definitely influenced by their parents. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping that discussion healthy, being able to have everyone feel like their perspective based on their environment is valued to the point that they have 100% of a stakehold in whatever art form we're doing.
And you all have hit on nearly every point that I was thinking of as well. But to add to the cognitive, also diversity in learning styles. Our children learn different ways. We have some that to give it to them oral, to present the lesson in a way that is just verbal from the teacher is enough. They don't even have to be looking at you, they got it. Then some of those need visual aids, they need extra modeling. Some students have to have hands-on. So even in the construction of your curriculum or your lesson plan, be mindful of that, be intentional to have different ways that you present the material so that you're hitting more students, their interests and their cognitive abilities, but also you're allowing yourself to repeat the material in a different way so that it's more likely to stick with the students. So I would add that as well.
All fantastic answers, of course. Let's move on to our next point. So why is diversity and inclusion so relevant to arts education in the 21st century? You know, we talk about wanting to be inclusive and trying to make sure that the repertoire or the curriculum that we teach is inclusive and diverse, but why does it matter so much right now? That one again, anybody who feels led to start that conversation, go for it.
So I don't mean to just take over, y'all, but this is just the way I am. I gotta jump in and say stuff. So let me back up and say the reason why arts education, and I get really passionate about this, by the way, arts education in 21st century is so critical because education in 21st century is indistinguishable from education in the 19th century. And that's a problem. Education in general is still based on the factory model of the Industrial Revolution. I mean, we ring a bell, we stop learning one thing, we ring a bell, we transition class, we go to another thing, we start learning that. We ring a bell, we stop learning that, and we start learning something else. That's not the way the real world works. The real world is that everything meshes together, everything communicates with one another, and everything addresses the other. And so what's the glue that holds all of that together, that really bridges all those topics? That's arts education. It's real world activity. It's real world taking what you learn. I mean, you can learn something all day long, but if you cannot actually take it and enact it and make it work for you in the real world, what good is the knowledge? And so arts education is what helps students to take what they learn, put it together, put a narrative to it, put a story to it, and make it actually work in the real world and what it looks like. And so arts education has its problems too there. We've got some systems of power that we've got to break down that I might get into in a little bit. But as far as education goes, we row up students, nice, neat rows. Don't you deviate from that. Teacher stands at the front of the room. He or she lectures and talks and this sort of stuff. You never get beyond the first 2 or 3 levels of Bloom's taxonomy in the regular classroom, whereas in arts education, we're all the time assaulting that evaluation and creativity level. Well, you got a big problem in those other classes. We want to preach personalization, but yet we want to assess standard. You have all this standardized movement is killing education. Well, what's happened recently is a disruptive innovation just happened. And so it's forcing us to throw out 300 years of education practice and do something different. It forced us to do it. And now we're seeing that, hey, you know, we did survive without those standardized tests. We did survive without that. And here's what I always say. When God starts making standardized children, standardized assessments will work. But God ain't making those standardized children anytime soon. So we got that with those issues. The arts are so critical because it's not standardized. It's always a creative approach. There's something new to learn all the time. It's a vehicle and a prism for learning other material as well. That's why to me, that's critical. Arts education is critical. And I'll stop and let somebody else talk now.
Well, I've got to piggyback on that. I think we all are going to piggyback on this. We probably have a lot of the same mindset about it all. But, you know, I also think the thing about the arts too is it gives them a community to try out communicating with each other, to try out being a team, to try out being able to listen to other perspectives. I mean, this is such a great opportunity. I mean, as adults, we can see it on Facebook that people don't know how to talk to each other, you know, and to have a conversation. And that's pretty much what the arts is. It's a conversation, whether or not it's visual, whether or not it's dance and you're aware of each other in terms of movement, whether or not it's music and you're aware of each other in terms of whether or not the person next to you is correct and you or how you're going to communicate to them if you're out of balance and all of these things. It's just such a little petri dish of all of these skills that they have to have and able to talk to a diverse group of people. And I just think it's crucial. I mean, obviously I think it's crucial, or I wouldn't be an arts educator, but I think it's crucial for these students to be able to have this skill. And I think it's crucial for our society. I think there's a reason that the arts have always been at the forefront of every societal shift throughout history. The arts have always been there. And I think, again, it is one of our forms of communication and one of our forms of being able to understand, again, not just our perspective, but other people's perspectives.
Just as Maurice made that statement about the shift in society and that arts was in the forefront, really quick, I saw a flash of different arts movements and how they correlate with what's going on in that time, during those times. And in what we're calling our pop culture time now, we are seeing a shift in the arts. The people who are being represented in the arts is changing as well. And the reason I think the arts is crucial for 21st century learners is because one of the things that the business world is requesting or desiring from their new students who are going to be employees out in the field is that they're critical thinkers and that they have a global awareness. And the arts is a quick way through any of the arts, through music, through visual arts. We learn so much about other cultures that we maybe have not visited yet or may never get a chance to visit. So I do feel that the arts is crucial in that manner as well for global awareness and communications.
I also think that arts education teaches a different way to value feedback. It is a huge part of what we do to be evaluated on a consistent feedback. And here is how you can do better. Here is how you can do better. Here is how you can do better. It's not a test where you got this wrong or you got this right. It's this ongoing, let me help you improve, which if you haven't had that experience in arts education, if you go into the job force, and you have a boss who, this is what you did wrong, this is what you did right, rather than this is how you can do better. Those things are interpreted in different ways. So I think that's another valuable thing that comes out of it.
Julia, I do want to back up just a minute and say this. I know that we need to move on, but this is something that's really critical. And I want to also mention that's going along the lines of something Wanda Lynn said is, think about how in the world do we know what we know about Roman civilization and Phoenician civilization and such as that. Those old antiquated civilizations, antiquarian civilizations. What do we know? How do we know what we know? We know what we know about them because of their art. We looked at their art to determine what it was that what their civilization was all about. And what I want to say today is 1,000 years from now, and they look back at America and this time in America, what are they going to learn about us? What's our art say? And does it give a message? That what kind of message do we want it to say? And so is it actually giving that message we want it to say? And so I think about those sorts of things are really important to our culture and our society. And I think about those job skills that the panel was talking about. And I think about kids right now. Kids do this. They're able to do this. They do this really well. But when they have to go in front of a potential employer, let me tell you something, folks. They ain't going to hand them a bubble test and say, go fill this out. That ain't going to happen. They're going to interview them. They're going to talk to them. They're going to want to know what products that they can produce. Where's your portfolio? You're going to go, what have you choreographed? Well, what can you play? What can you do? And the interview that's going to be happening there, there's a lot of acting that goes with that. It's a performance that you're giving there. And so we're teaching kids skills that they're going to need to be able to survive in a job market that we don't even know yet. And the arts are critical for that. And even more so now, that all that is encompassed by an umbrella of social emotional learning. We're teaching students how to be empathetic, which is probably the most critical thing right now as far as social skills go. And we used to, for years, call those social skills soft skills. We now are learning that those soft skills are not so soft anymore. They're the skills that we really need to know right now and that our kids need now. They need that. And so the arts, there's no one better, literally no one better in our schools to teach social emotional learning than the arts educators in those schools.
I'm so glad that you brought that point up because especially when you talked about looking at civilization and recognizing that that's our identity. That's something that I talk about all the time when I have the opportunity to talk about arts education. It's literally that same spiel is like, how do we know who we are as a people? We look at our art. And I think just to tie up the end of that conversation, I know I'm not a panelist, but I just feel like I want to say it. Talking about 21st century, I think for me, we can talk about communication. We can talk about all of these incredible points that have been made, and they're all true. But I think what it comes down to, in my opinion, for me, is humanity. When we lose art, we lose our connection to humanity and who we are at our core. And when we think about the 21st century right now, we are in the technology age where you're right, Dr. Street, where we're doing this all the time. And, we're on our computers and we're communicating so much via the internet. But in that same vein, we're losing our connection to one another, and not even just to one another, but sometimes to our own identity. And so being able to create and express that, to me, is why diversity and inclusion is so important in the 21st century for arts education, is because we just need to know where we come from. And that's kind of where we know where we're heading and things like that. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Let's go on to the next question. So how do we tangibly measure diversity, equity, and inclusion in an arts classroom? So I think a lot of times we kind of like what you said earlier, a lot of times we make it a race issue, and it's not just race. It's gender, it's sexual orientation, it's that linguistic barrier, it's cognitive, it's all of these incredible points that you made. So how can we tangibly measure those things within our classrooms to make sure that we are diverse and that we are inclusive and that our students are getting that equitable education? And not even just for our students. I think a lot of times too, we think, oh, well, our numbers, here's our demographic makeup for our students, but even just representation for teachers and administrators and people who are involved in facilitating arts education.
That I think is a good question, and it's hard to use the word tangible. It makes it so hard in the arts to think how do you measure. But I do think that even though that's a good question, it's twofold. The way we use we talk about the accessibility in the classroom, because oftentimes I hear people say culturally relative materials. To bring that to a predominantly a school, in my school, which is an urban setting, and the students, the larger percentage of the population, they're a like population. They're all from the same basic social economical background, and actually in their case, the same racial category. So to bring culturally relative material to them, they already know who they are. I want to see those same materials go to a school on the other side of the town that doesn't look like they look, so that those people can become more familiar with who they are. And that's what I would like to see a big push for, to bring them to a school where it's wonderful for them to see themselves in works, in literature, in art. But I feel like I want to believe that our teachers in these schools are already helping them to understand who they are. I need for people who I'm seeing just in the media and just in our culture, our society in general, a lack of understanding of otherness, of anyone other. And I don't just mean race. It could be gender issues, people who are physically challenged, any of those things that we don't personally experience. I would just like to see us make a conscious, I would like for it to become more natural, but to start consciously or intentionally to bring those materials to our students and utilize that and be mindful of it when we are constructing our lessons and our curriculum. But that's a hard question.
Yeah, I ditto what you say. It is a hard question, and I don't know that I have an answer to throw on the board about how we tangibly measure it. But just to echo what you said, I'm in a lot of courses with people from other countries and different socioeconomic backgrounds when we're discussing critical race theory, and often the conversation turns to, well, in my community, we don't have this issue. And my professor repeatedly says the color of your skin could all be the same, but there are still issues of power and privilege no matter where you are. It could be the color of your skin. It could be where you live. It could be a number of 100 things. But what we need to be looking at is power and privilege, because it exists in every single structure that we're in. And it could be race, and it could be socioeconomic, and it could be just, how many generations your family has lived in a certain area. It could be anything. But measuring it is tough. And I mean, there are all sorts of qualitative ways I think that we could dig into it. But the big thing with really investigating how that's affecting a community is those kinds of studies to measure, to tangibly measure that kind of stuff takes longevity. So you need somebody who's willing to dig in for the next 5 years, not just for a semester. People at the district level who aren't going anywhere. Ain't it, Nathan?
Out. And you know, I didn't mean for the word tangible to throw you guys for such a loop, but you're answering it the way that I expected you to. And I think it's important for people to know that there may not really be that like physical, tangible way, because I think right now with everything that's going on in the world, that's what we're seeking. I think there's so many people who are seeking to see tangible change and tangible measurements of how we're going to be moving forward. And I want to see that too, but just understanding that it's difficult to see that right now in this moment, but to be thinking about those, I like how you worded it, those qualitative ways in which we can see that. And then, you know, moving forward, show that progress as we go.
It's not short term at all. Like people have to be invested to do it over time for sure.
Maurice, I saw your hand.
Yeah. So I, you know, again, the tangible side of it, that does make it difficult, but something that we've started doing this year that I think for me, even though even that is a little open to interpretation, is we've started using Pathway to Success. It's Dr. Tim, Scott Rush, that particular program to just explore different aspects of our program, like communication, attitude, et cetera, et cetera. And so at the end of a unit, if we want to call it a unit, that makes it sound so educational. And I think it's more out of the box than that. All right. But at the end of the unit, they have to answer certain questions. And for me, I'm always sort of on the lookout. You know, for instance, when we talked about communication, the different students talking about, it's hard for a middle schooler to not include how something makes them feel. But just looking at those different forms of communication and seeing, does this student feel included? You know, and some kids were very upfront about it, and that, you know, I'm not very good at verbal communication because I'm shy. I tend to do better with the virtual side of things, and et cetera, et cetera. So that for me as an educator made me look and say, okay, for this student, I need to come up with some strategies to help them improve this so that they're more well-versed in their communication skills. But even just thinking about attitude. But what's interesting to me is seeing, I guess what I'm looking for when I look at those two is that every student, despite what their background, experience, environment, growing up, whatever it may have been, that student feels again like they're 100% a part of things. And again, I don't know if that's necessarily tangible, but I will say that for me, being able to see their thought process and being able to see their ideas pretty much on a weekly basis about something that does pertain to our music, but is sort of an outside skill that even if they don't continue music, those skills will go with them. That has given me a lot of perspective to evaluate whether or not I'm doing a good enough job of creating an environment where they feel like diversity is valued, where they feel like everybody has an equal say in the program and that there's equity. And so, you know, I guess my advice is when you can, see what their ideas are, see what their thoughts are, see how they feel, because they'll tell you a lot about it. And my kids, they type it up and submit it. And so I have that in writing. If I need to go back and review it for a kid, or I notice there are trends of a certain group of kids I'm not quite reaching, I try to change something. So,
Julia, I'm gonna push back just a little bit on everybody. All right, here we go. I like a little controversy. So first of all, we got two different kinds of measurement that we need to understand. One's quantitative, and that's typically what everybody thinks about when we think about measurement, is because we're geared to that. We've been conditioned to quantitative because what's the data say? What's the data on all those kids? What's the test data say? What's the You know, what's the achievement gap is, you know, what are all this sort of stuff, and this data and that number, and we boil everything down to a number, which then dehumanizes everything that we do. And so we got to be really careful about measurement in the arts, that we don't dehumanize it, and that we don't really break it down to its bare minimum to where it's not even an art anymore. So what we need to stress as a group, as an artistic community, is that yes, we can get quantitative data. We can do that. And I'm a quantitative guy. That's what I do. I teach quantitative statistics at a university for education, doctoral education statistics. So I love that. But we got to understand that qualitative data is just as critical. And the arts probably leans more heavily toward qualitative data, in that we are analyzing those things that we see, those things that we can touch, which is tangible, those things that we can see, that we can ascertain with our senses. It's really critical that we understand that and uplift that and show our schools and our school systems that, hey, yeah, we can get numbers, we can boil it all down to numbers, but what does the number really tell us? So the way that I describe quantitative versus qualitative data to students is, quantitative data is a mile wide but an inch deep. Qualitative data is an inch wide and a mile deep. So what the arts do is we get a mile deep with our students, and so that our students understand what it is about themselves and each other that's really important. Now, here's the point where I'm going to push back a little bit, is that I want everybody out there to hear me. Listen to Dr. Street really well. Okay, if we ain't seeing change, we ain't doing it right. Now's the time that if we are going to have some change in education and in arts education right now, never let a good crisis go to waste. Never. And we've been sitting in a crisis now. We better learn how to leverage that baby and make it work for us, because now's the time for us to seize what we've been looking for and what we've been wanting for some time now, and force it to happen, whether it is social justice reforms, whether it is racial justice reforms, it is making sure that the equity and access to our programs. Now's the time that we seize this opportunity and we demand that it actually come to bear. That is, and if we are not seeing that change, we've missed the boat. So we've got to have that tangible change.
Yes. Preach.
I
Here's
love
the
it.
thing I do not get, like, in my focus in my PhD work is definitely like the theory to practice gap in teacher education. And I have no idea how a school of education, I mean, if you have done any kind of work, if you've done the work that Dr. Street has done, if you are investigating, you know, any kind of doctoral work that some of us are doing, qualitative research is a real intangible thing. How are school districts ignoring anything qualitative and only focusing on quantitative? How is that even possible when 95% of schools of education are focusing on qualitative research? I just I can't wrap my head around it. I can't.
It's easy, Christina. That's a great question. And it's one that I don't think we need to have lost on us as arts educators, is that quantitative data is easy. It's easy to get. That's the reason why you've got bubble tests. We're the only profession in the world where bubble is a noun, an adjective, and an adverb. We're the only, that's how odd and crazy that we are in education. We got bubble kids that go and bubble a test, and then when they don't do well, they're on the bubble. So, you know, we've got it. That's craziness. And so when we continue to go down that route, we've got to understand that it's easy to bubble the test and feed it in, and it spits out a number at us. That's easy, and we can interpret that number. Where it gets messy, that we don't like to really deal with, is when we start having to differentiate between this student and this student and this student and this student, which is exactly what we do in the arts, which is so critical to students, so that they're just not some random number that is in this big wide painting that nobody knows is really there. I think of Seurat and the dot paintings that he had. The students, you got to have each of those dots to make the whole picture come to life. But you've got to have that dot, and you've got to be specific about that dot. And if you don't know about that dot, then your whole painting's messed up. And the way that quantitative research works and the data works with our school system is don't really care about what that dot looks like and what it says. I just really want to know what the whole picture tells me. Well, that's not at all the way education is. We're teaching children subjects. We don't teach subjects to children. We're teaching children, first and foremost, about a subject.
And Christine, I think the reason quantitative stands out with the stakeholders who call the shots is because usually money is linked to it. It's easy to put quantitative data on a pie chart. It's easy to put that on a visual display to justify why money is being spent, but you can't always put a dollar sign on performance. And sadly, I'm afraid that it's because it boils down to figures that have dollar signs in front of it. That's what I'm afraid of.
I'm really glad that we went on that tangent. We went a little bit longer on that question, but like, I love the pushback. Dr. Street never apologized for challenging our views and for offering another perspective, because that's what we need. I love educated conversation like that, where we can banter back and forth and just dig a little bit deeper into stuff like that, because it does open your eyes and you're like, oh wait, yeah. I have 2 more questions for y'all, plus one more from an audience member who has asked a question. So I am going to ask, and we'll try to keep these responses a little shorter because we're going to run out of time here soon. Let's see, which one do I want to ask? Ooh. Let's go here. So arts classrooms are often classified as safe spaces. We hear that a lot, like, your classroom is my safe place, or I feel so comfortable in your room. Why do we think that is? And, you know, for maybe educators who, arts educators who don't experience that conversation, or have students that come to them and say that, you know, chorus is their favorite class, or, you know, I feel super comfortable in your room. What advice do you have for us to create a more inclusive and safe space for our students?
I'm going to jump in first on this one. So I think the number one reason that people feel safe in our spaces is because it's a space of creative expression. Expression is built in our curriculum. That being said, there are a million core teachers who teach math, English, language arts, science, social studies, who do the same thing. And so I really just want to punctuate right here. Like, I love to give a shout out to our arts teachers, because our kids feel safe because they can creatively express themselves in our classes. But there are core teachers who teach creatively and create the same spaces in their classrooms, who don't have kids sitting at a desk doing math problems. There are core teachers who do the same thing and really incorporate creative aspects into their class and create safe spaces the same way. And I think that's really important. And I think it's, depending on where you are, sometimes there's like this kind of elective core class divide. But I'm going to give a shout out to my core teachers who teach creatively. And I think what makes a safe space is creative expression, whether you're in an arts class or a math class.
And I'll be short, I promise. And I think too that it is, and I agree with Christine 100%. There are great teachers out there regardless of area. I think we tend to, as arts educators, really accentuate relationships more, and that we build those, because a lot of times we spend more time with our students than anybody. We'll do after school rehearsals, we'll do weekend rehearsals. I know, as a former band director, I was with students sometimes 7 days a week, you know, so I think there is that relationship element there that is really critical. And you know, I'll just give you a little anecdote. Back with my first teaching gig, was a school that had some racism problems. There was almost an all-out race war the year before I got there. And I started that gospel choir, and I had almost all of the Black kids in my school that would be in my class. And they would tell me that they feel threatened by some of the teachers in that school because of racism. But they loved coming to my class because they felt welcome and accepted for who they were. And the greatest compliment to this day that I've ever gotten from a student was from one of my African-American students who said, "Mr. Street, you are the whitest Black man I've ever seen." And that to me made me feel so good because I had made them feel comfortable being around me and made that relationship with them.
I think I have to agree too. We spend time with our kids too. I mean, they get to know us, and I think a lot of times, and I know it's not universal across the board, but a lot of times we do try to develop that sense of family. And I wonder if part of that too is that as artists, our whole career is basically relationships of varying kinds. I mean, whether or not that's musical, whether or not that's having to interact with the people that we're making music with, or that we're dancing with, or that we're creating visual art with, whatever that may be, everything's sort of built on that sense of I guess, togetherness. When we get into that situation, we're all part of the same thing. And I know that for me, I really try to encourage, I mean, I guess one of the advantages we have, and it goes back to, I think it was Dr. Street that said this earlier about, or maybe somebody else, but we're always having to be kind of analyze what we're doing. And that I think, that also translates into, if I'm having to learn how to analyze myself without being hypercritical, then I need to also be able to look at other people without being hypercritical about them maybe being different from me. And I think, for me, if my kids, it just doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter in your classroom. Those kids are there because for whatever reason, whatever your art form may be, it brings them a sense of comfort and a sense of solace and a sense of belonging. And our job should be to nurture that. I think our job should be to nurture that and cultivate that and help them have that place. Because a kid, that you have kids that go to school and they're like, I cannot wait to do math. But, you probably have a lot more closet singers that are singing in the shower. All right. And stepping into a middle school chorus room is their first time really trying that. And also too, I talk about with my chorus kids, with my trumpet, if I'm having a bad trumpet day, I put it in the case. But if I'm having a bad vocal day, I have to work real hard to not beat myself up about it and understand that, my voice is a part of my body, but also too, if I'm a Devo, nobody's going to want to work with me anyway. I won't get work no matter how talented I am. And, I just think so many of us are even arts educators because at some point, some arts educator taught us about good humanity, and it left such an impact on us that we decided, what, this person changed who I was. I was a little robot, you know what I mean? I've just practiced and everything had to be technically perfect. And, some of the arts educators I had really taught me to actually think and feel and be a real human, and I think that's why they feel safe, because they're free to try out being who they are without judgment, because again, that's just not the point. That should never be the point of what we do. They should be able to be who they are, love what they love. I could go on and on about this, but I think for me, I'll tell you, if I could sum up my core program in one word, if I want them to feel anything, I want them to feel like they have a family. I know that I have a mother that she knows she can call me. She's like, listen, my 5 kids in elementary and my 2 kids at this, I'm trying to figure out how to get them on the same schedule. And I'm like, all right, let me contact some people. And again, I think the world would be a whole lot better if people understood that the arts, man, like our goal should be humanity. All the other stuff, let me tell you what I'm loving. Before COVID, we used to have all these performances back to back to back. Can you guys perform at this? Can you perform at this? We would love for you to do that. the best thing ever about what's happening right now is that we can focus on our family to make sure everybody knows that they're loved and everybody knows that they're included and everybody knows that, again, when we step in there, everybody's valued, everybody's welcome. And I'm going to stop because I'm so passionate about this. I probably won't shut up unless I mute myself.
So
Maurice, you are making me cry right now. I'm having to like do this. But to echo what you're saying, everybody's frozen right now, so I have no idea if anybody can hear me. I am missing a lot of students in virtual learning, but the ones who are there and who have zero space are like living their best life like this, taking dance class the best way they can. And I have moms taking class with their students. I have siblings coming in. So everything you said about humanity is just absolutely what it's about.
And so, Julia, to make it quick, I'd say, because I have to guide myself, I put mine just in one sentence. I'll give you the one sentence. So to answer that, or to address the statement that you brought up, I put that I feel that the essence of what art is and what it embraces encourages and nurtures self-expression, self-awareness, and opportunities to think mindfully and critically about the world and the events around us and how we ourselves fit into this. I think that's why it's a safe place.
I love it. And even if it wasn't as clear and concise as you made it, it would have been beautiful either way. Guys, this has been fantastic. I want to ask you, do you mind going a little bit over 6 o'clock, or do you have a strict 6 o'clock deadline? Okay, I want to ask you one more question from my list, and then we'll ask the audience question. And this one, it may end up being a shorter answer. It's a shorter question. So just to kind of wrap up, so here's a quote. Here's the quote question. I'm a white, cis, etc. educator. What can I do? So for any educators that are watching right now, who maybe don't fall into the minority of any particular category, how can we help? What can we do?
I know I can't speak. Whoop, go ahead.
Nope, you get to go, Maurice.
I know I can't speak from that perspective, but I think it just goes back to just be human. Just be willing to, I think this goes for anybody. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what your politics are, what your finances are, whatever. Be willing to listen and understand, be willing to empathize, be willing to, again, I think it's all about the humanity of it all. I think I'm trying to think, actually. I think sometimes we look at it at that race side of it, but I had one Black ensemble music director ever, if I'm thinking correctly, and that was in 8th grade. And I can tell you though, like the middle school, I had a middle school director 2 years in 6th and 7th grade, white man, impacted me immensely. Same thing about my high school director. I just think it's about caring about people. It's about being willing to understand people. I think sometimes somebody put this into perspective for me, because I know that I tend to be a strong leader and that sometimes I don't mind speaking out, but everybody's role isn't necessarily speaking out. Some people, their role is modeling what it is that we're supposed to be doing. And I think that, no matter what race, gender, whatever you may be, I really think you've got to sort of figure out, like, what is the best way for you to model good humanity. For some of us, that might be speaking out. For some of us, that might just be as educators going into the classroom and being a great person, being an inspiring person, being passionate about the people that are in front of us. And so I don't know that there's necessarily one answer to that.
I want to jump in really quick. I just had a visual when you asked that or brought that statement up and asked the question. I don't know how many of you watch The Office, but Mike on The Office, he believes that he is this wonderful leader, but everything around us shows us when they document it that he is not. So I think that the best way to address it is we have to look within ourselves. A lot of times we talk about the why. Education push for the past 3 years. What is your why? What is your why? We talk about what's our why we do this. Why are we educators? But maybe we should look at the why as to if we have identified some blocks, if we see any blockages that we have with relating to someone, understand why those are there, and then work backwards on how to remove those or how to better deal with those. So don't be a Mike, get out there and figure out what your why is, why you have these situations that don't allow you to understand. We all have them. It could be, I wouldn't know what it's like to be a millionaire. I would love to figure out, how to get past that. But, understand what your reasons are for why you have these areas of blocks, and then work, try to consciously work past those, and to know that it's okay to have them, because none of us are perfect. And a flower would stay a seed if it never grew. So that's what it lets us know. That helps us identify it's a living thing. So I don't want to be stunted with my growth. I want to understand that I have areas that I need to improve on so that I may grow. So I would say the first thing is to look within yourself.
You're muted, Christine, so I'm going to jump in now. I'll beat you to it. I'll be quick, I promise. I am a white heterosexual male, so in case you couldn't tell. And so I speak exactly to what you're talking about there, and that is that I reject, I will say, and Maurice was going there 100%, he actually did go there, that I reject the thought, the thinking in some educational circles that students have to have someone teach them that looks like them. I don't agree with that, because I'm like Maurice. I had teachers of every ethnicity that impacted my life in some form or fashion. And those who impacted me the most were those who developed relationships with me, that knew who I was and what I came with, accepted that, and then celebrated that. And every student in their classroom, regardless of what their background was, that's what we need to do. Celebrate our children, the differences that they come, and know that we're teaching children. Teach the children, give them your best regardless of what their background is. They deserve your best. And if we keep that in our minds, regardless of who they are and what their background is, then we're going to be in good shape. And I'll pass it on to Christine.
Christine, is it okay if I say something right before you go?
Absolutely.
So Dr. Street, you just kind of made me a little bit emotional talking about being the educator who understands who their students are and what they come with, and celebrating that, because I'm looking at Maurice Burgess on my screen right now, and he was that person for me, and you knew who I was and what I came with as a student who came from an at-risk background. And you loved me anyway, and you poured into me. And so obviously you don't look like me. You are not, we don't mimic each other in that way, but definitely kindred spirits. And I just thought that was a really beautiful explanation you gave. So I just wanted to say that. Go ahead, Miss Christine.
You just muted again, Christine. I'm going to jump ahead of you again if you don't.
I think I unmuted. Shut it, Nathan. All right. You put me in a very awkward place to push back, both on you, Nathan. I appreciate and I agree with everything you said and your relationship with Maurice, but there is a ton of research that points to the fact that our young brown and black children who do not see people in their own field are not doing as well. So that is important. So I appreciate everything you both said, but having role models for our young brown and black children in education, in science, and math is super important. And now I forgot what else I was going to say because I had everything else before that, but then you guys started talking and I shifted my thought and now I can't remember.
Let me clarify real quick, Christina.
Yeah, no, because I might.
What you're saying
remember.
is correct. It's
Yeah.
absolutely correct to have the role models and all that. What I'm saying is that I reject the idea that I can't teach.
Oh no, I agree with you 100%. Yeah. No,
But you're right. I needed to clarify what I was saying there. That I can't teach those students, and I can't have a relationship and a common bond like what Julia and Maurice had. Their common bond
yes,
was their love of music,
yes.
and they built that common bond right there, and then that flowered from there. So yeah, you're right. I just wanted to clarify.
And whatever I was going to share about a common bond was lost like 3 conversations ago because we switched. Sorry.
Well, and I think it's a love of people too, a love of being good to other people. And I guess my point that I'm making is because it was sort of from the perspective of somebody that is maybe white, maybe somebody that's cisgender. And my whole thing is that you don't have to, I don't want somebody in that position to feel like they have to look like the people in front of them to be able to reach them. Now, do I think it's important for representation? Absolutely. And I'll tell you, when I look at my young African-American males, especially, I grew up singing gospel, but like probably 99.9% of the singing I do now is classical. Well, sometimes culturally speaking, that's not the most popular thing to do. That's not something that is always accessible. I really was not in the majority when it came to being an African-American male that sang classical music growing up. And so I totally understand that visual representation, somebody who has a similar background or similar experience has to be there. But I also think a lot of that ground can be covered if we're just willing to understand, and if we're just willing to look at people and people be people, and us understand that we're going to have some differences in terms of our background and experiences. And so for me, but I also want to say that another thing that can be done with that, especially nowadays in the sort of the technology age, you can have those people that represent something different included. It's no different for me having a soprano come in to work with my sopranos or to talk to my sopranos. I can teach sopranos, but we have a second choral director at my school now. And I tell you, I was pretty adamant that it needed to be a woman. And it's not that I wasn't reaching my girls. The girls would say that they love me, but I just really wanted them to also have another perspective of somebody that had some of the same experiences as them.
So important.
Thank y'all for engaging in that conversation, and for being willing just to clarify things and talk back and forth with each other. Again, I love that we're in an environment where we can do that and continue that professional discourse. So we are done with my questions. There is one question that has been submitted via Facebook from one of my friends who is the band director at my school, Miss Allison Velez. And so I'm going to read her question out to you. And it says, this school year, COVID has greatly changed the way we present our curriculum, forcing us to create new techniques and lesson plans. If and when our safety guidelines are lifted, will you, as educators striving for diversity, go back to your normal teaching strategies, or will you incorporate the new techniques we are currently forced to teach with? If so, what would this hybrid approach look like in your teaching environment? Really interesting question.
I'm assuming some of this is from the technology side of it too. So, it's interesting because right now I am teaching some kids face to face and I am teaching some kids virtually. And in fact, I'm teaching both at the same time in most cases, except for on Fridays. And so I think it's really interesting to me. I think you have to incorporate some of the strategies. For instance, two flip sides of this coin. I have kids that are in the virtual academy that absolutely miss being in the classroom. They want that space that they consider their safe space. They want to be there, but they're currently virtual academy students. And so I've really had to be creative in how can we find ways to take the space to them. Whereas there are other kids, and know this for a fact, that because, I think we're all having to sort of do the virtual thing a little bit. There are other kids that say, Mr. Burgess, when we do this virtual choir, can I record it while my cohort's here? Because I just don't feel comfortable singing at home with my parents, like having my whole family hear me. And so I think, again, I think you've got to constantly have that pulse check on your program. And if it's working and it meets the needs of some of your kids, keep it. If it's not, obviously that's something you maybe want to let go and try to see if you can incorporate something else that can meet those needs. But I think I very much am always looking for ways to be forward thinking for my kids. And right now with the situation being what it is, I think there are too many beneficial things. Like, for instance, I can look at a baritone and say, all right, go to your Flipgrid, because I have a whole series of things about being a baritone that you can listen to that can help you navigate through this emerging baritone thing. Stuff like that, I'm going to keep it. All right. But obviously some things are going to maybe be left behind. Who's to know? I mean, this pandemic, how long are we going to be wearing masks? How long are we going to need to distance? I mean, time will tell, but I think we just constantly, it goes back to needing to have the pulse check on your program to see what is meeting the needs of your kids. And if it's working, keep it. All right. If you need to try something different, try it. I think that's any educational year, even not now.
So what interest? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I have to laugh because Maurice went to how it benefits the students, and selfishly, I went to how it benefited me. I was thinking that the technology, once I learned how to use Nearpod, and I could record my video ahead of time in Loom, and then pull it into Nearpod, pause it, ask the question, and have students engage whether they were live or not. I thought, I was already thinking, why didn't I know this before? So I can start. I have the youngest kid. I think I teach the youngest students out of the panel here. So I don't know if you've seen second grade boys with painting materials while you're in the middle of giving the instruction or the introduction to why you're going to do what you're going to do and how it connects with art appreciation. But and you got no other adult in there with you, and there's like 16 of them. So I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put this on my white screen, project it, and they'll hear, it's still me. They'll hear me giving the instruction. It pauses, causes them to think. They can answer without me watching them while I'm giving them the materials. So I can distribute my materials at the same time that I'm giving instruction without being like, hey, don't do that. Don't touch him. I can handle that while I'm also teaching at the same time. And it's still me. It's not like it's YouTube doing it. So selfishly, I'm going to use it for myself, but my kids will benefit too, though. How about that? Yeah.
So I'm really excited about the fact I have never been trained on Canvas. And up until today, haven't been trained on Canvas, even though I'm using it. But I love this idea that I am putting my classes up on Canvas. So if somebody's not there, they can learn the movement material. But the fact is, the only reason I can do that is because I'm at home using my own computer and my own technology, and it's not possible in my school. So that's a real challenge that Guilford County is dealing with. So super excited about the possibilities of transferring what we're doing virtually to the school, but we're going to have to see some real changes there.
Here's a country term for you. The horse is out of the barn and it ain't going back in. So we're going to change. We're going to change the way we're doing things. We got to. And
that horse is going to need to find some money.
It's going to need to find some money for sure, but it ain't going back in the barn. So the kids, our students are, here's the thing, y'all. Let me put it this way. We are now seeing the dramatic need to shift from teacher-centric education to student-centric education. We have been for so long the ringmaster in our classrooms. And if students learn, they got it from us. Well, guess what, y'all? Students get the knowledge. It's easy to get. You can get it online. You can get it anywhere. They don't need us to get the knowledge. I just hate to tell you that. But what they do need us for is how to appropriately apply that knowledge and how to synthesize it and how to create with it. They need us as arts educators to expand their horizons as far as their skill development goes. They need us to foster that love of music and art and theater and dance. They need us for that. They don't need us as far as educators go to learn how to do math and science and history and ELA. They just don't. That's easy to get on their own, but that does not negate the need of any teacher. That just means that they need teachers even more to help them navigate that process and to synthesize it together now more than ever. And so that's where I'm going here, is that, yeah, we're going to have to keep kids online. It's going to be with us. I believe, I almost said I fear, because I'm kind of old school. I like it. I like the kids in the building. I like to play off of people, but I do believe that this is with us from now on, and we ain't going back. As a matter of fact, I think we're probably going to expand on it, to be quite honest with you, because in Guilford County, I can tell you right now, there are some students that are failing because they're online. We got a lot of students who are failing. We got some students who are excelling better than they've ever excelled, because this meets their need. And if we're going to put students at the center of and model their educational experience around the student, rather than make them bend to what the school's format and template is, then we're going to provide them every opportunity that we can, and it's going to be different all the way around. And I think that that's okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting right now too, because you do start to see which kids need that face-to-face interaction and need a different type of interaction with you, and which kids can kind of be on that virtual side and be successful. But again, I do think there's certain things. For instance, a kid can send me an email now, because they now have emails. Every kid in the district has a device. They can send an email to me now and say, I'm having this issue vocally. Is there any way that we can meet? And I can find a free moment, and I can just go to my Outlook, create a Teams meeting, like establish that time with them, and then we just both log on. There are opportunities for me to meet certain needs of my kids that I could not before. Either the parent had to get the kid and they had to take them home, or they had something after school that would prevent them. But now, some of my kids can log right off of their computer from their virtual class, and then school's over, and then I can see them 10 minutes later and help them out. And that the kid's not having to get on a bus. So I think you're going to see a variety of things. And I think we've got to kind of roll with it. I think that part of education's biggest issue is the unwillingness to adapt and the unwillingness to have a growth mindset. You got to look at the situation and say, okay, again, it's the other day on my PowerPoint, the quote was about lemons and lemonade. When life gives you lemon, make lemonade. We're going to have to look at all the things that we have, and we're going to have to figure out the best flavor of lemonade that we can make with it. And I think it's going to require us to be creative and, again, explore those things that are working for us, and try to find others that can too. And it's not going to be the same for every kid.
I think you guys have all made incredible points. Ms. Velez, I hope that that answered your question. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this conversation tonight. I don't want to hold anybody too much longer because I know it's a Saturday evening. Thank you for your willingness to share what's on your heart and your mind. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience with me and with all of those who have watched tonight live and will go back and watch later. Thank you for being a part of this. I sincerely, I can't thank you enough. And it has been a pleasure getting to talk with you and to hear from you and to meet you over Zoom. And I hope that, you know, these relationships that we've formed will continue to prosper and see us down the road, and that we can stay in touch professionally. And for everybody who's watching, I hope that you have a fantastic night. Remember, at 6:30, I am going live one more time for the conclusion of the virtual arts retreat, where I'm going to be drawing names for the raffle basket. For those who attended, there is a basket that is filled with $100 worth of art supplies and fun arts themed gifts to give away. So be sure that you tune in for that here in just a few minutes. Again, thank you so much to each of you for your time tonight. We are so grateful. Facebook, we'll see you later. I'm going to stop the live stream. Everybody have a great night.